Hey, everybody, good morning. Happy Good Friday. Happy Easter weekend, if you celebrate. I'm going to do a little reflecting today. We'll do some Bitcoin charts. I know people prefer that the most, but as it's Easter weekend, and I like to continually remind people about the wars in this neck of the woods, I just want to put some reflections out there and some macro data as we head into the weekend. Try to be a bit more reflective about peace in the world. You know, I'm not as religious as I used to be. I was raised Catholic. And I remember in high school, the teachers, whether they were just teachers or the priests, saying, pray for peace in the world. And the older I get, starting my own family now, something I really do wish for. I don't have a formula for sure. It seems like it's more dangerous times now than ever. Perhaps I shouldn't say than ever. But I just want to put some things in perspective, at least from where I'm seeing them. And maybe it can help frame your reference because, again, as an American European, someone who grew up in America, it's a bit jarring, some of the stances it seems that the current administration is taking towards the likes of Russia. So just want to go through a couple things here. This is actually not the chart I wanted to show to start. I wanted to show this. This is an email to my buddy Peter, longtime Bitcoiner, very popular show. He branched away from Bitcoin this year, now has his own kind of general show. But I wrote this to him on 23 February. He's got a pretty decent sized platform now, but still bringing on someone like me who is so pro-liberalism, pro-Ukraine, and also pro-Bitcoin. I find myself always at this kind of unique Venn diagram of people that support Bitcoin. Just want to read this to you. This is something I wrote to him before we came on the show. Hi, Isaac. Good to see you. So, some overall thoughts on the war. We can revisit this after a month and see where we are. From a U.S. perspective, I see these broad options to achieve peace. This is 23 February. After the Putin call, before the Zelensky disastrous meeting in the White House. 1. Trump goes ballistic metaphorically against Ukraine, accedes to Putin's demands, removes troops from Europe, NATO, could collapse thereafter. 2. Trump swings the other way, goes ballistic literally in favor of Ukraine, forces Kremlin to back down. 3. Trump has a breakthrough for peace, soft and hard power used with all sides in conjunction with Europe and Ukraine, ceasefire agreed with real security guarantees. 4. Putin maintains maximalism and doesn't fold to Trump. Fighting continues. If I was forced to place probabilities on any of these, highest remains number 4. 1 and 2 are extremes. 3 is what Trump is probably going for, but Ukraine's security remains paramount, and Trump, I don't think, actually gets this. Baltics and Poland have been correct for decades. Europe is finally waking up, could spend more, which is what Trump wants anyway, and he's correct. Blaming the victim always remains always wrong. I've said this for 3 years. We'll check and see if I said it on our earlier interviews. This is me and Peter. If you want to know deep in your soul how you would react to Hitler taking Czechoslovakia or Hitler and Stalin carving up Poland and the Baltics, you just need to ask yourself what you are thinking right now. I've said this for a long time. Many others have said this, and I believe it in my heart. This is a question for our times, just like people had to ask this questions 80 years ago. The further one is from the epicenter of terror, the colder one's feelings get, lessons remain the same. So that's what I wrote to Peter. Almost 2 months ago now, and I think safe to say at least from a probability standpoint, I was correct. It's number 4. That's what I said. And Trump couldn't have done 1 and 2 together, right? This was what I was always told, is Trump is either going to go ballistic for, against Ukraine, or ballistic for Ukraine. That means helping Ukraine or hindering Ukraine. And I think for sure, number 1 is still the path that Trump is on. All right, so that's the idea. That's the thinking that I'm still having. We're moving into Easter weekend here. Very unfortunately, unfortunately, it doesn't do it justice. I fear more bombings this weekend against Ukrainian targets. Ukraine is always obviously had a Orthodox church. It's completely broken away from the Moscow patriarchy. But they have many religions in Ukraine. Obviously, there's Catholic influence. It's a unitary church. And Russia is pretty much, at least from Moscow's center. Of course, Russia has a large Muslim minority. But from Moscow's point of view, it's an Orthodox country. That is Russia. And Ukraine is breaking away from that in many other ways. So I think that I fear what they're going to try to do again, even just this weekend. But not to dwell on the tragedies which Ukraine continues to experience, I want to look at some raw numbers here and see if we can draw any conclusions. It's about the way that the world may be going in the next decade, let's say. Okay, so this is SIPRI, the Stockholm Institute for Peace, has done a pretty detailed analysis of military spend across most countries in the world. I'm using this data. They should be updating this pretty soon, and I'll update this chart when I get it. But this is unfortunately on through 2023. Okay, but you're still going to get the idea. Thank you, Gio. Hi. Yeah. I'm certainly a Ukrainian supporter. I wish I was a negotiator. I want to talk a little bit more about Mr. Witkoff during this show. Again, this is a reflective show. Good Friday. We're going to do some other macro, but I'm going to try to reflect on some broad GDP and military things here. Your position must be very hard, but my question, are you able to negotiate without allowing your feelings and emotions to impact your judgment in taking decisions? Yeah. So this is what I want to address, actually, is what, if Trump is going to go for peace at any cost or an enduring peace, and what that might look like. And I think we can get there, actually, with some figures, some facts and figures. All right, so this is 30-year military spend versus 30-year GDP. It's just a simple sum. And if you do that, you can really see the discrepancies between economies. Now, this is log, okay? So log scale on the y-axis, log scale on the x-axis. When you have a straight line in log scale, which clearly this is, I'm not drawing the trend line, but clearly this is, you have a power relationship, interestingly. So this 30-year growth of militaries and the 30-year growth of economy is a power relationship, just like Bitcoin. Bitcoin over time, the Bitcoin network over time, that is hash rate. Hash rate versus addresses is hash rate versus price. They're all power curves. So here we go. Obviously, number one, U.S. $17 trillion over the last 30 years. This is ending 2023. They're in NATO, that's category here. $455 trillion economy over the last 30 years. This doesn't really mean much as far as, this is just for size, okay? It's $455 trillion in new goods and services sold into the economy by Americans, is what this means. $455 trillion versus $17 trillion. That represents a percentage. It says percent GDP, percent of military spend versus GDP of 3.74%. So the size of these bubbles, the size is the percentage. Okay, give us a little bit more of a flavor. China, next up, 3.5 trillion over 30 years, and this is growing much faster than the United States as far as a spend. They're at 600 billion already spending per year at the moment. 200 trillion in GDP. Right? That's a 1.72%. So actually, the economy has grown faster than the military for China, 1.72, and you can see the size of the bubble, much smaller than America. Okay. Now I'm not going to go through every one, but I want to show you how crazy things can be on log scale, and if you take it off. Okay, so let's look at let's take off log scale for GDP. I think that's what I have here. Let's look at the next picture. It's the same chart. Sorry, I took off military spend. So look at this. This is log. This is linear log. So now military spend is linearly. GDP is still log. And look at how isolated America is. 17 trillion, 3.5 trillion China. Way far away. All right, we have Japan here. United Kingdom, 1.7 trillion over 30 years. Saudi Arabia, always a huge one. And this is, remember, the size of the bubble is the percent to GDP. 8.7%. Okay, and they've had obviously the petrodollar, they've had agreements with the United States since the 70s. They're a big one. And here's Russia, obviously a big one as well. This is top 10 in military spend, 1.4 trillion. All right, now, again, let's go back to log, 30-year military spend versus 30-year GDP. Let's go back to log linear. All right. Again, it's a power curve. Okay, so when you take one of the log scales off, in this case GDP, look at how it just shoots up and then slowly goes over. Again, United States, totally in a league of its own. China here, obviously close, and this is the whole discussion with the tariff wars. Half, and as we know in the next, I actually don't remember the projection, but even in raw figures, they're set to overtake the United States as far as GDP goes, and that's a goal of them for sure. But half of GDP. Next up, Japan. And remember, Japan's GDP per capita has not grown in 30 years. It's remarkable. Shows you what inflation does. But in raw terms, they are number 3. Third biggest economy in the world. People forget that sometimes. Germany, 4th. 196 trillion over 30 years. UK, 5th. France, 6th. Italy, 7th. India, 8th. Brazil, 9th. Canada, 10th. Somewhere, yeah, I thought they were out of the top 10. Yeah. Russia is somewhere 11th. Okay. So there's Russia. Now, we'll get some more. We'll tease some more things out of this chart. All right. So this is all countries in the world. Let's look at NATO. Okay, it's just NATO. Obviously, U.S. still way in the lead. But the relationship is still power. Okay, you can see that everybody here is more or less, and Hungary is on the lesser end, leaders of Slovakia on the lesser end. I don't think the people of Slovakia, probably not the people of Hungary either, but they've let that dictator slide along for much longer in Hungary. than whatever Slovakia is trying to do now. But generally, people on this path, okay, spending more, higher economies. This is NATO security. Okay, Greece obviously a historically huge spender, 3%. They've always been above 2%. The percentage is just a guideline. This isn't like a fee to NATO or anything. It's just a guideline. UK has always been above. And then you have Germany here. Interestingly, a small dot, right? Only 1.26%. They've, U.S. military bases have been in Germany for a long time. And Germany has, in return for that, now has, the second largest economy in NATO, the fourth largest economy in the world. But they don't have to rely on security as much. They still do spend, but it's obviously quite known to Trump that he wants them to spend more. Now look, if I take the BRICS countries, how this little pattern going to look like on a log chart. Let's take BRICS. I completely agree with this. Good comment here from Gio. For Americans, friendship is measured by interests. This is absolutely visible, but not for the naive Europeans. Like John Mersheimer says, it is anarchy on the international level. I certainly disagree with his further down conclusions, but that comment is totally rational. And another person I disagree with, but who has an interesting, at least observations about this, is one of the old neocons, Bob Kagan. One of the first, modern political books I remember reading was one by him over 20 years ago. It's called On Paradise and Power, or Of Paradise and Power. It's talking about how basically the United States is pulling on leading the NATO world with security, and Europe can't even keep up. And it was even embarrassing. He uses a quote during the Balkan Wars throughout the 90s. It was over 90%, like something like 94% American kit that was used in the 90s. It was just embarrassing for Europe. So Europe was in this sort of postmodern paradise, at least they thought they were, and America was spending all the way. But as we know, America went into some very detrimental wars for herself and caused a lot of problems. But it's interesting that you still have this relationship. Now, look, I want to show you BRICS. This is BRICS Plus. This is all the main BRICS members: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which goes back to like a Goldman Sachs paper from the 90s. I forget who wrote it, but it just started as like a lark. It wasn't even like a real agreement. And none of these countries, by the way, they have it's not as strong of a values alliance as NATO. Okay. But it's also the partner countries and even Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is going to come, at least applied to become a member of BRICS. So I'm going to show you basically the main BRICS countries. And there's a lot of NATO adversaries in this group. Okay. So here's NATO. Watch if I just do BRICS. NATO. BRICS. Obviously, the dots are bigger. And they're out of whack. They're not on a line, which is interesting. Okay, so China's the leader here, clearly. This big one is Myanmar, which has had military leadership on and off for 30 years. So no surprise there. And these are not distorted numbers. I checked. It is true. The 30-year military spend versus the 30-year GDP is 17%. That's a true number. And they're like a partner member of BRICS or an observing member. They're not a core member, but they have all these different memberships. Bolivia, Cuba, Uzbekistan, Ethiopia, Belarus, all right, powerhouse next to the Baltics and Ukraine and Poland. These are low spenders on military. Kazakhstan. The big spenders, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India. The bigger these dots are, the more they're spending per their economy. Okay, so 4% for Russia. And this is only from 2023. This is going to 10%. Whether anybody wants to sort of bury their head in the sand or not, this is going to 10%. Iran. $250 billion spent on the military, at least as estimated by SIPRI, versus 10 trillion in output over the last 30 years. And as we know, they're one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. Actually, Russia surpassed them. But I think it's interesting is there's not really a values alliance here. You know, Ann Applebaum writes about this with Autocracy Inc. It's not necessarily a values alliance. It's an alliance of convenience. There is autocratic tendencies in every one of these countries. And you can actually see the disunity, to use that oxymoron. You can see the dispersion in the way that these countries operate versus NATO. Again, I'm not saying NATO is perfect. I'm just saying it's quite interesting that you have a more constant looking power curve here compared to BRICS. Let's look now at this one with NATO. Okay, so here we go. Again, look at how, so this is just NATO linear scale on the Y. I can't tell you how many newsletters I've read over the last 20 years which say that America is going back to Mesopotamia. The American economy is finished. The American way of life is finished. Now, Trump is doing an interesting job in maybe pushing on some of those things. But to say that America is still not the apex predator in the world is just defying reality and trying to sell newsletters, probably. So, but me as my great marketer, you get these great charts for free. That's not going to happen. The only thing that's going to bring down America or bring down America a few pegs is going to be if Americans lose freedom. If they lose the ability to have elections, if they lose the ability to make their own choices. And I think a lot of people are disillusioned by the woke left in many, in the prior years, but now we have a situation where maybe the woke right is a danger. We'll have to see. But no one's going to stop America here, even as much as Trump can try to destroy alliances or change things over the last, the way the last 80 years have gone. Can you see that? You can't. Hold on. Let me take my picture off here just for a second as I go. Oops. Okay. So there you see the 17 trillion over 30 years spent on the United States military on 455 trillion in goods and services. That's a 3.74 military percent spend to GDP. Okay. So on the one hand, you can certainly see why someone like Trump is saying that he has the power to end the war in Ukraine in a day, or now it's 100 days, and most people don't believe it's going to be 100 days. Certainly didn't do it by Easter. On the other hand, you have all these countries who have basically fallen in line with America over the last 80 years. Eastern Europe, of course, is the new one. And you have these countries which are way more autocratic. So look again, here we see the dispersion. We're off the line. So here now it's the military spend is just pathetically low for NATO. Way higher here for the BRICS. Okay, Saudi Arabia way up, just on a relative scale. Okay, so this is linear now, linear on the Y, still log on the X, and you just see that dispersion. Russia at 4%, that's going way up. India, relatively small spending for such a big country. 45 trillion in output. China, 200 trillion in output. Okay, so China, over 5 times larger than India's output over the last 30 years. But the question that I continue to have here is, what kind of value? And it goes back to what Ronald Reagan said. It says, we lose freedom here, there's no place left to run on earth. And what it seems to me is that the United States is ready to try to do deals, as that term is used too much now, according to Trump. I think it's not actually fair. I think they do have more strategic views, but still, the idea is try to do some deals with these countries, then lead the way in sort of freedom and values. And this really is the again, this is Good Friday reflections here. This is now the second time this has happened at the UN. People can criticize the UN all they want, but this language, which was going to have the European Economic Council be more the UN Economic and Social Council. This Jonathan Schreier sent this. These are the countries that the United States is now opposing these types of resolutions where, it was the Council of Europe. That's what I meant to say. It was the Council of Europe. So just a resolution on, again, these things are not binding or anything, but resolution on cooperation between the UN and the Council of Europe. They voted against it because of its language regarding Russia's war. But who did they vote in opposition with? It's the US, Russia, Belarus, Eritrea, Congo, Mali, Nicaragua, Niger, and Sudan. Notice even countries like China are not on this. If the US does not have to vote with Russia, it's choosing to. And for me, as an Atlanticist, let's say, it is jarring to see the United States voting with this country on language. It's obvious that they're trying to do that to appease Russia, to make Russia happy, to make Russia get some wins, to go for a peace. But they're continuing to bomb Ukrainians every day. And it's just jarring. It's jarring for me to see that the United States is siding with one of these autocracies on these votes, something that never, ever has happened in 80 years. Let's look at it this way now. Let's look at this is log on the military, linear on the GDP. So then we can sort of see the raw power of economies now. Here was more the raw power of militaries. Now we see the raw power of economies. Let's go NATO. Okay. Here you can see a power curve again. Germany, UK, France, Italy, Canada, Spain, Turkey, as I guess they're called now, Turkey, Netherlands, Poland. Greece. Smallest, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Albania, Luxembourg, Latvia, Slovenia, small countries here. All right, so this is the power of the economy in NATO. Now let's look at the BRICS. Again, an interesting dispersion. The scale is completely different, note. Okay, so because the United States involved, $450 trillion over 30 years, and then you got Germany over 4 times smaller. Let's look at the BRICS. China, the hegemon in this group, 200 trillion. India, as I said, 5 times smaller. Russia and Brazil. These are the 3 big countries in this group. Then Saudi Arabia, this is, as we know, mostly oil and gas money. Indonesia, every other country here is pretty small. So it's even a more compressed than NATO. NATO at least has something more like a power. So it's interesting. It's not, these are, you can almost see it in the figures that this is a more disparate, not necessarily values aligned grouping. And these are generally autocracies. These are generally not democracies. Myanmar is wild, 17%, the size of that dot. Military spend to GDP. So if you go back, and now we're on log again. Just have an interesting relationship, right? Most of these countries have the values of Americans, whether it was pushed on by America or not. Say in Germany, it was clearly pushed on by America, but, not as much in the United Kingdom. Remember, Churchill and Roosevelt were afraid that de Gaulle was going to run an autocracy when he got back into power in France. Instead, they went on to the Fifth Republic, and the French president does have an extreme amount of power, mostly because of de Gaulle, actually, compared to most other European parliamentary democracies. But, one way or another, kind of on this interesting trend of paying for defense, but also having good economic growth and good quality of life. And so what jars me, beyond just these UN votes, which I know are not binding and not that big a deal, but remember, this is the second time this happened, where the United States is going along with the Russian talking points, just in apparent interest to find peace. The disinformation realm is increasing. Right? We saw that Russia is prodding the United States now to unfreeze the reserves that the United States froze at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine and allow them to just buy planes with it. Seems like that's certainly an unfreezing of the funds for their criminal acts. We're seeing that the disinformation tools of the government are being disbanded by the Trump administration. The Russian disinformation. We're seeing people like Tucker Carlson say that Russia is a beautiful place that has freedom and liberal values and family values. So just want to go through a couple here more. Good comment from Gio. The main problem facing underdeveloped countries is not the absence of democracy, but that of good governance, from Nigeria to Haiti. Not the absence of democracy, but that of good governance. Yeah, no argument for me there. But let's try to look at some other facts here to see what we can conclude. So Tucker Carlson likes to say that, Russia is a bastion of Christian values. Here's the abortion rate. This is from World Health Organization. It's an average from 2015 to 2019. Russia's 12th in the world. All right. I was actually surprised to see Georgia, a Christian nation, not Orthodox, but a Christian, a non-Orthodox Christian nation, part of the Soviet Union. Certainly, there are Orthodox in Georgia, but not as much as Russia. And they are number one. But again, of course, they are under have been under the thumb of the Soviet Union and Russia for a long time now. So you might question that, as well as Azerbaijan, okay, which is not a Christian nation. Vietnam, Madagascar. Let's just walk through them. Cuba, a bastion of liberal democracy right there, right? China, number 8 in the world. You do have some maybe surprises. Trinidad, in the Western world, but poorer. India right there, number 10, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Okay. So whether you're Christian or Orthodox or Catholic, I mean, that's one argument. I'm more talking about just communist, dictatorial influence in a society and how that can affect it. If you want to find the liberal, and of course we have some tragic cases in Africa still, which have had trouble always with democracies. But if you want to go to the liberal democracies, okay, interest in Ukraine, the Unitary Church, also some Catholic influence there. Again, I don't know the answer of why, but clearly Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and they're not suffering from these high rates of abortions like Russia. Georgia's an interesting one. I'd be curious if anybody knows more there. Why Georgia again? But all the rest, very authoritarian and very high. And then you have Ukraine way down here. And then you have, Catholic nations. You have free liberal nations, Australia, Estonia. Look at these rankings. Denmark, United States. This is it's not my figure. WHO. Okay. This chart can tell you something. If we're talking about liberal Christian values. Let's look at this one. I often say, before I go, let's see what Gio's saying here. But building a real and sustainable democracy is a much more complex problem. Yes, freedom cannot exist without responsibility, and this is educated from early childhood. Education is crucial. This is a crucial one. 100% agree. Education here is crucial. And I need to get more charts. So I'm about to show you some more here, but this is one thing that Russia just did not do. They did not have a denazification program like the Germans did. And even Ukraine knows that they suffered. All the Asian tigers were able to make astonishingly rapid progress because they had authoritarian regimes led by patriotic people who knew how to gather extraordinary professionals around them. Yeah. Certainly you have Singapore as an outlier from some of the charts I'm showing. So, yeah, all good points here. But let's keep looking here. I have sanitation. I often have said that, which is not a rare figure to find, is 1 in 5. You look at Russia in its totality, 1 in 5 people don't have a toilet. I'm going to read you this. This WHO study from 2022 actually is saying it's something more like 2 in 5. Again, I'm not talking about the people in Moscow. I'm not talking about the people in St. Petersburg. And I know this, by the way, even being in Latvia, which is one of the poorer countries in the European Union. When you go outside of the capital cities, when you go really close to the border of Russia, sanitation, you can see the overhang from the Soviet Union. Let's just put it that way. All right, here, look at this. Richest countries in the world. I got the 2000 numbers, okay, and then the improvement from 2000. Okay, so this is basically, the blue is the change in 22 years. This is pretty interesting for Andorra. Don't know the story there. Qatar. Anyway, 2022 is the total, okay? Rich countries, democratic countries, liberal democracies. They're all cleaning themselves quite well and have hygiene, okay? Hygiene. Liberal democracies. Spain, New Zealand, Malaysia, Latvia. I'd say, this seems... I came to live in Latvia in 2006. So I've been in the country almost the entire time of their existence in NATO and their membership in the European Union. This number seems about right to me. I could say it's even low. 1 year is a long time over here in the Baltics. I mean, there's a lot of progress constantly. Slovenia, not surprising to me, these numbers, these improvements. Canada, Slovakia, Jordan, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, always decent, no improvement, interesting. Anyway, down the list. Belarus got worse from 2000. So now Belarus is at 75%. Was at 85, down to 75. That's surprising me, that number at 85%. Okay, and where do we get to Russia? Finally here. This suggests that it's not 1 in 5 people that don't have a toilet in Russia, but 2 in 5. Okay. We're going to go down and read exactly what this says so people don't get angry. But it's an amazing chart just to look at, just to see how, compared to the rich countries, the non-liberal democracies, countries in Africa that struggle, and what the Bill Gates Foundation is trying to do. It's amazing to see the numbers here. But let's go down. Let's read this. Okay. Population using an improved sanitation facility that is not shared with other households, and where excreta are safely disposed of in situ or treated off-site. Improved sanitation facilities include flush, pour, flush to piped sewer systems, septic tanks, or pit latrines. Pit latrines with slabs, including ventilated pit latrines and composting toilets. All right, this is the WHO. This isn't me. Where I used to say 1 in 5 Russians didn't have a toilet. It's possible it's 2 in 5. And this is not a new figure. These are 2022 figures. All right. This is in line with them bringing donkeys to the front to replenish their soldiers. Donkeys. All right. So that's sanitation. How about this one? Safely treated domestic wastewater flows. What do you do with the water once it, what do you do with the dark water, the gray water, the brown water, once it goes? Again, rich countries are going to be at top. United States is number 12 here. United Kingdom, number 13. Israel, 14. Okay, down we go. Ukraine, 64. Okay, Ukraine, 64. Russia, 115th in the world. This is the second biggest army in the world. $2 trillion economy. Oil and gas station masquerading as a state. Let's read it. This indicator measures the volumes of wastewater which are generated through different activities and the volumes of wastewater which are safely treated before discharge into the environment. Both of these indicators are measured in units of 1,000 cubic meters per day, although some data may use other units that require conversion. And then they just go into more about the measurements. And if it was one water stat from the WHO, that'd be one thing, but here's 2. HIV, HIV prevalence. Okay, again, poor nations, struggling non-democratic nations. South Africa is an interesting one here at number 3. HIV prevalence total, Russia's 26. Okay, not nearly as high as Eswatini or Lesotho or South Africa. 10 times lower, in fact. But elevated. Elevated. Okay. If you go to the, again, you got to go way down here for the liberal democratic nations. And there are more, of course. I could do TB and other ones. And I actually do, to your comment, Geo, education is going to be an important one here. And I completely agree with this comment. At some point, Russians are going to have to stand up for themselves and take out their autocratic leaders at some point. I don't think that's happening within this leader's lifetime. I don't think it might even happen within the next leader's lifetime. Maybe after that, maybe 20 years from now. But until then, what is the signal to the world to vote with these countries? That's my question. That's what's so jarring for me as was I brainwashed with American propaganda growing up? Sure, everybody's brainwashed with their own country's propaganda when they grow up, but I'd much rather believe in the American ideals than anything that Trotsky came up with, or Stalin, or Lenin. And the fact that Tucker Carlson, Daryl Cooper, Dave Smith, Scott Horton, all these people that are trying to say that Russia is somehow, a good country with a good leader that's just taking care of his people, just counter to the facts. I know that there's an immediate knee-jerk whataboutism for most people that have my views. They say, well, what about what the U.S. did to the Middle East? What about Iraq? What about Afghanistan? I agree. The U.S. should not have gone in with only Great Britain by its side in 2003 to Iraq. Certainly wasn't a very UN conscious action. But neither is what Russia is doing here. And one doesn't make the other right. They're way bad in these rankings. And again, something like this, the toilets or the wastewater, you have to understand, this is not anything personal with anybody in the nation. This is just, I think, a good illustration of raw infrastructure. When you have Russia, second greatest army in the world, down here with, according to the World Health Organization, not just 1 in 5, but 2 in 5 people not having access to proper sanitation. I know this is not Moscow, not St. Petersburg. This is more out in Siberia. But go out to the American West and see how life compares there with somewhere in Siberia. Tucker Carlson should do a documentary of that and see what he finds. All right, so this is a good one. This is a good comment from Gio. Why was there no Marshall Plan for 1990s Russia? Read Jurgen's Commanding Heights. Daniel Jurgen, the book Commanding Heights, read it. There's a PBS documentary as well. And read about the failures of Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs, by the way, is very paid for by the Chinese Communist Party right now, pro-China, pro-Russia, pro-authoritarian. The United States is the devil. Read about Jeffrey Sachs's failures in the 1990s. And furthermore, even if we want to absolve Jeffrey Sachs of his failures, he said that he needed even more money. He always said he needed more money from the West. Why is it that Russia continues to have these problems? Bad sanitation, high abortions. But all of these former Soviet satellites, and indeed for the Baltics, illegally incorporated into the Soviet Union countries, are on at least the right trajectory, the right trend line, if we're going to say that the United States is the right trend line to be on. GDP per capita, I didn't put on. I need to get that on. How did I forget that one? GDP per capita is obviously a huge one. Let me pull that up, actually. I hope you guys are enjoying these Good Friday reflections. It's not personal. It's not personal about any person who's from Russia or is from Belarus. If you knew something about my family, I don't like to give too many personal details away. You would know that it's certainly not personal, depending on where you're from, if you're a Slavic person or not. Give me 1 second. Okay. Sorry for my delay here. This one is a good one. Russia hit, again, purchasing power parity is not what you look at. You look at GDP per capita, nominal. You look at the power of a country. United States has a high GDP per capita and people can't afford eggs right now. The crazy stuff happens in the economy. But if you want to look at the power of a country, look at regular nominal GDP per capita. All right. In 2025, Russia's GDP per capita is projected to be $15,000. Okay, that is $15,000 per person, GDP. When was the last time any of these countries hit $15,000, not inflation adjusted? Not inflation adjusted. Okay, for Monaco, you'd have to go back to 1972. 1972, Monaco is 15,000 GDP per capita. And this is more insane because that's $1972 for Monaco. $15,000 back in 1972 was way more powerful than $15,000 today. So if I would adjust that inflation-wise, this would look even worse for Russia. But I don't like adjusting for inflation because it confuses people and it just see that it's even worse. Hi, Roman. Good morning. Good morning. All right, as you expect, a lot of the rich countries. When did the United States hit $15,000 per person in GDP? 1983. You'd have to go back to 1983 for that. Bahamas, 1984. Japan, 1986. Which, again, Japan has inflated their way out of a lot of crises. You don't want to follow Japan. It's what the U.S. is doing. Germany, 1987. It's West Germany, of course. France, 1987. We got Faroe Islands. We got a lot of different things here. Finland. Okay. How many countries do we have to go through to get to when did they last have $15,000 per capita? Andorra, 1989, which is interesting because they had a bad sanitation numbers, at least in 2000. Australia, 1988. United Kingdom, 1988. Hong Kong, 1991. Israel, 1992. Macau, I'm going to go gambling, 1994. Northern Mariana Islands, Virgin Islands, U.S. Greece, 2003. Taiwan, 2004. A lot of the islands. I like putting the islands on here because islands, if you ever go to vacation like in Sardinia or Sicily or just even in islands of mainland European countries like Sardinia, Sicily, as an example, or someone help me. What is France's? What's France's island right above Sardinia? My geography is killing me at the moment. Napoleon was exiled there, right? Anyway, you go to even some of these islands, and when you're in an island economy, it's rustic. Like even if it's a big country like Italy, you go to Sardinia, and you can see that it's quite different. It's quite different, and all these island economies are better than Russia. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they had $15,000 GDP per capita. Russia's 90th in the world from this GDP per capita ranking. Only in 2025 did they hit $15,000 GDP per capita. Yep. There is a dollar. There is a purchasing power parity effect. Okay, so Russia likes to use purchasing power parity. And it's true that if you did purchasing power parity for the Russian GDP, which is like 2 trillion, it would go up some insane thing like 6 trillion. But again, I don't like using that because Russia's the second biggest army in the world. They can't take Ukraine. Most of this GDP anyway is oil and gas. It doesn't filter down to the bottom line person. And with Poland, it's kind of like that, I think, but in other ways, because Poland is not on the euro. They have the zloty. It's a cheaper currency. Stuff is really cheap in Poland. When we go down to Poland, even from the Baltics, it's cheaper. The Baltics are on the euro. So there's this sort of conversion factor. Having a cheaper currency will give you a lower number here, but you could still live a little bit better. And Russia argues that, by the way. But specifically, I would be much more comfortable making that comparison with, let's say, Poland or Lithuania, which is 77. Lithuania did it in 2013. Estonia should be higher. Latvia did it in 2008. I'm actually surprised at that. But this was a way overheated economy, 2008, at that number. Took Latvia way longer than Lithuania, probably, to get back to it. Where's Estonia? 65. Estonia did in 2007. So I think there's some of that. You have, obviously, before the crisis, a lot of these countries overheated. You have that, too. But Poland was just a slow and steady grower. Poland did not have a financial crisis in 2008. So it's true. You have to know that context a little bit, that backstory. But none of that is an excuse for Russia. Second greatest army in the world. I mean, you would think they would be much higher, much quicker than that. Roman says, insanely cheap for higher quality compared to UK, especially food. Though I can't see it staying cheap for long. You're speaking of Poland, I presume. And yeah, it's a great economy, great people. So there's something to be said here. If it's taking your country this long to reach this number, I think that, pressure needs to be applied. Here's the same thing, but straight up nominal. So this is the same chart. Russia's going to be ranked. Why is it different? I usually should know this. It's 90th here, 81st here, Slightly different because, GDP per capita is, if a country, so this actually means since Russia's 90th here, 9 of these countries have fallen back below Russia. So they beat it. And we could do the analysis, but 9 of those countries, Russia has actually beaten 9 of those. So it's above. Maybe Chile, Palau. Yeah, Chile passed it here in 2012. Look at that. Chile hit 15,000 per capita, and now they're even lower than Russia. So it's bad news for Chile. So that's the discrepancy. Anyway, 81 out of how many countries and polities do I have in this one? 212. Look at that. Russia's losing to people that have GDP per capita 3 times less than them. This is where I really have I struggle. It jars me. It jars me as an American to see that the votes, the moves are for quick and not thoughtful peace compared to more enduring or just straight up support for Ukraine. I mean, what's the problem with Ukraine's not even asking for soldiers. They're just asking for weapons. Another thing to say about, I should have put the chart up. I can do it next week, but the Europeans have spent more than Americans on Ukraine. But even for this 115 billion or so that has actually been dispersed to Ukraine, it's only about 115 billion euros, whereas the Europeans have now already dispersed 130, something like that. I wanted to have this chart ready for this stream. I forgot to. 70% of that number, 70 billion euros, accounted for in euros here, but put it back into dollars, whatever, $77 billion, something like this, is when Americans say that they donate that to Ukraine, what they are doing is taking 30-year-old kit, some of their Bradleys, some artillery, some shells, that was not going to be used anyway. It was going to be scrapped. All right, 30-year-old kit that was also valued, has the value of 30-year-old kit, sending it to Ukraine. And then with that $70 billion, they're buying new American equipment for Americans, for the use by Americans, from American jobs in the American economy. So this $70 billion figure that, Trump's throwing out 300 billion, 400 billion, he's been doing it for a couple months now. None of that's true. Europe is more, something like 130 billion granted from European governments. $70 billion of the American 115 billion granted is literally something that is 30 years old, and Americans get the new value today of new kit for that price. So if you actually do it that way, Ukraine was probably getting, half that value, theoretically, or 70% of that value, because they're taking shrink-wrapped old kit from America that America was never going to use anyway. So from my perspective, as far as like a deal, you want to talk about a good deal, you have a country that's fighting for its freedom. No one is helping them enough, in my opinion, but still, they're not asking for troops. They're just asking for aid to push the invader out of their territory, and I think that we should help them. At least I've tried to do that with my own pocketbook. Everybody can always do more. There's plenty of more Ukraine YouTube and Twitter influencers talking about this stuff for a long time, but it's old kit. It's old kit that Ukraine is getting, and Americans get the new dollar value, basically. I'll pull up the Kiel Institute. I think it's the Kiel Institute is the best one. So let me put it back. This is a good, very good tracker. And if you go here, I have some other charts that I need to update here, but I had someone help me. Did they change the website? They used to have a nice. Is it here? Here we go. So just the brass tacks one, it's still, this has been there for a quarter. It's 114 billion euros. Europe's at 137. This is through the first quarter. Through February even. Through February, not the first quarter. Okay? Start of the war through February. 140 to 115. All right, so Europe should be doing more. It is doing more. They've promised even more, but they haven't dispersed it. Okay, UK or US promised, I guess, a little bit more. Maybe they won't disperse it. This is probably Biden. Anyway, 70 billion of this number for the United States is not at all financial aid. It's nothing going to Ukrainians. It's literally Ukrainians taking old American kit. That's the most important thing about what America is doing for Ukraine, and it's just the disinformation there is stunning. Ukraine gets 30-year-old Bradleys, which is great. This is what they're asking for, but they're getting 30-year-old Bradleys. Americans get $70 billion worth of new equipment. Yeah, I've seen this. Reminds me of the Budapest Memorandum. We'll see. I haven't heard the details. I haven't heard. This is like the fourth draft of this agreement. Geo says today Ukraine and U.S. signed the memorandum on the minerals deal. We'll see. Roman says, isn't it good for the economy, though? It uses old weapons and allows for the manufacturing replacements. It absolutely is. I mean, it's great for the American economy. Again, it's not good for, if you take the side that America is just the baddies in the world and shouldn't be doing anything militarily in the world, and there are plenty of right-wingers that seem to be doing that right now, then it's not good. But of course, yeah, it's 100% good. What I've just described, the 70 billion or 77 billion, I heard it's 70% of this number. So the 75 billion euros worth here is absolutely good. It's new. It's a new injection of government funds that are going to American companies, American jobs, American equipment, primarily for the U.S. It's 100% good. So that's just not said enough. People ask and this is again where Trump with this minerals deal, people are acting like it's Ukraine has lost the war and it's reparations. Ukraine needs to give up all of its minerals to pay for this aid. It's just Ukraine taking old equipment that was going to be scrapped anyway. It's literally shrink wrapped equipment from U.S. warehouses that hasn't been used in 20, 30 years. I cannot stress that point enough. So again, for those joining, we're doing a little reflection here. Still on, I know the people that like me to talk about Bitcoin and apolitical topics. But since we're going into Easter weekend, and I highly, highly fear more strikes against Ukrainian civilian targets this weekend because it's Easter, just figured I'd talk about it. Just trying to find a couple things about some religious tendencies in Ukraine. Ukraine, you might remember or might have heard, they switched from the Orthodox holiday calendar basically completely. They completely got off of it in the last 2 years. So, where the Russian Orthodox calendar is 2 weeks staggered. So New Year's itself is like the biggest holiday in Russia, and then they have their Orthodox Christmas is the week after that, 7th, and the 14th is the Orthodox New Year. Ukraine is off that. They've just scrapped it completely, severing all ties and going to the Western, which is the so that they're on the Julian calendar, the old, that's the old Julian. It's like the news never made it from Rome to the Orthodox states. They've always been on this 2-week behind calendar. But the Gregorian calendar, which is the one we've been using for a few hundred years now, is Ukraine has switched to that in all shapes and forms. They did that because of the war. NATO expanded because of the war. All these things happened because of the war. And it's not like Putin is, if you're sympathizing with Putin, he's getting the exact opposite of what he wanted. Thanks, Robin. Politics is good. Besides, what is economics without politics? I think it's a true statement. I'm trying to show these social things too, because, and I'll get more of these, but I don't know if anybody saw the debate between Douglas Murray and Dave Smith on Joe Rogan. This is something where I need to, at least, I want to make a video that kind of responds to the points that I have. Again, I don't agree with Douglas Murray on all points, and the Ukraine war is no question different than the Israel-Palestine war, and I don't have a stake in that one, and I think everybody feels sympathy for Palestinians. It's a harder conflict to sort of parse through. But what Ukraine is suffering from is an overhang of communism, authoritarianism. And the data shows. Let's go to the 2000. I don't think it ranks. Yeah, my numbers won't work, but Russia should be even lower. It's not 64. It's probably lower. Anyway, it doesn't work. Mexico, just above Russia. Interesting. Ukraine, above. Also, I wanted to show non-NATO, non-BRICS. So here we're going to find Japan. We're going to find South Korea, Australia, Mexico, Taiwan, Switzerland, Argentina, Austria, and Israel. That's the one I wanted to show. Singapore too. So obviously, these are if you thought about any of these countries, you would think friendly to the U.S., right? Neutral. A lot of people want Ukraine to be in this bucket. The problem is, if Ukraine is in this bucket, they're going to be attacked again. No one seems to want to attack these countries. Austria is interesting because I just listened to Tomas Ilves, the former president of Estonia. He says he doesn't trust Australian intelligence for anything. He says, they like disbanded their intelligence apparatus. Their whole thing a couple of years ago, they tried to reset it. Austria has obviously been playing both sides through the entire Cold War. There's Russian spies all through it. And what it is what it is. It's still a great place, great symphony, great culture. It's an interesting sort of we don't pick a side state. Switzerland, obviously, another interesting one. And Taiwan, this is obviously the big risk. Ukraine should obviously be on here too. Where is it? There it is. So here's Ukraine. This 6%, by the way, of military spend to GDP, this is only through 2023. This is going to go up. This is already going to be above 10% when I get the 2024 numbers. All right, because they're going to add like another 70 billion in 2024. And most of that is going to be GDP. So this 200 billion versus 3 trillion economy over 30 years is obviously, small economies, but, big spenders. Oman. It's also interesting how big these dots are relative to NATO. Remember, the bigger the dot, the higher percentage GDP. So smaller dots here. Germany, look how small Germany is. 1.26% over 30 years compared to, well, obviously compared to the BRICS, but even compared to the neutral. This is neutral or non-NATO, non-BRICS. These are big dots. So it's not like if the U.S. retreats, and I think that they are in many factors, the question is if they even retreat from NATO. Because if they do, all of these countries, mine included, are going to run to France. Poland is already actively doing it right now. And they're saying, we're going to need nuclear protection. And even if the umbrella isn't extended from France, they're going to get it. Poland's going to get the bomb themselves. I've been saying this as well for years to friends over here. I would like Poland to do this jointly with the Baltics. I'm not sure. The Baltics were like kryptonite because we're former Soviet Union. No one wants to scare the bear. But what are we going to do? We have 6 million people. Where's Poland? There's Poland. The question, of course, is if Germany goes for the bomb. They're already talking with Merz about reviving their nuclear energy infrastructure, which they scrapped after Fukushima. Do we have any Germans watching here? Stream. I love Germans. I have a lot of good German friends. But there is a policy, not a policy, it's a tendency for overreaction in Germany. It's a tendency. And the fact that they scrapped the nuclear program 15 years ago, now they're going to come back. They're going to get the bomb. If U.S. goes out, they're going to get the bomb. That's another question. It's just a question. Nuclear armed countries generally don't want other countries to be nuclear armed, i.e., see what happens with Iran. Obviously, tricky situation there, but European countries are not going to just sit by. Yeah. If you want to see what Russian peace looks like, go to Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. And those last two in Georgia. I would agree. There's a great video of a guy from Moldova going through Transnistria to Ukraine, playing the Ukrainian anthem. And Russia is so low on people right now in Transnistria. They got like nobody there. And there's just these kids at the border. The guy just like goes through, he's like talking down to these border guards in Transnistria, these Russian peacekeepers, right? It's obviously Russian occupied area, former Moldova. It's a mess. It's a mess. Who's they, Geo? Who's they? Slanitz asks, can I do a video when a power law hits cutoff? Real world limits constrain growth. In which sense of the power law? On Bitcoin? It's interesting. These are power relationships. So I should, straight line on log is a power. So if we take off, I spent the beginning of the video doing this, but yeah, this is a power relationship. This is a power relationship, although a steep one. And then just the BRICS. Less steep, actually. Let's look at economy. If we want to come back to the social things, we can do it, but Good Friday reflections here. I updated this one. Remember, this was scary days for Besant. Tilting higher. Well, the markets are up. I mean, actually down from the last couple of days, but up compared to that, Liberation Day plunge. So we'll see. If this black line drifts higher or sideways and the green line drifts lower or down, Trump will do everything he can to fire Powell and to make interest rates low again. The Fed funds is 4.25 still for a long time. Okay. I should take this to 2 decimals. Here's 4.5. He really wants low interest rates. He knows that it will spur spending, but of course we risk higher inflation with lower interest rates. What do you guys think the next peak in interest rates will be? The next cycle? I think we're in it, as I've said the last couple of days. The newsletters were wrong calling it end in bonds for all this time. It took us a long time, but I do think the COVID pandemic swinged it. So even if we go back down, I think we're drifting higher over the next decade or two. Just wonder how high we go. This just seems bankruptable to go back to 15% on the 10-year. I don't have the target, but the Fed funds short-term rates were even higher than this in the 80s. We're like 20%. Wild. Yeah. Geo says the Russians back to resolving the conflict. I agree. Roman, not too easy for Germany to load nuclear deterrence on submarines, though I'd assume their geography doesn't allow for the best port locations. Sure. Yeah. Well, there is always the triad. The triad is what America has. It's what Russia has as well. But yeah. Air, sea, and land. 3 different ways that the U.S. can launch. And 2026, Roman says we're going to the tops. Probably. Things work out that way in life, don't they? Where are you based, Roman? You were fond of Poland Maybe had some Poland roots. So here's the power. Going back to your question, Slanitz, I don't know if you're talking about the Bitcoin curve, but right on track, guys. Right on track. We could puke here still, and you know, let's just look at the delta of a daily. So this is yesterday. Okay. Today I don't have. But look at the black line. The difference between the black line yesterday, 98,269, and today, 98,365. Okay. It's almost $100. $94 is the delta. $94, right? Is my math correct? 98,269 plus 94 will equal $96. Why can't I do math? That's what happens when you... $96 a day is the growth, the marginal change in the power curve. Comes down slowly, so I haven't shown you this in a while, but let's look at the delta between end of year now, power curve, okay? So 735 minus 618, right? What's the difference? 735 minus 618. In dollar terms, it's faster. It's growing more. Okay, $117 at the end of the year. In percentages, it's lower. Right now, we're moving down to 42% a year. Somewhere probably 44 right now, 43 and a half. It will be 42%, this curve, by the end of the year. But in dollars, it's faster. So that as well is something to take into account. And it's why I don't worry about the fact that we don't have exponential growth of Bitcoin or something. I mean, the dollar figures still get huge based on these growth rates. And maybe this can answer your question, Slanitz, but it's going to take 100 years to get for this curve on a slope to get down to 10% a year. Long time. In the meantime, 45%, 42% is way above anything market. Roman, UK, very good. My plan is to retire early and leave the UK, but got questions where to go. Okay, nice. Thanks for coming back, and thanks for the comments. Yeah, I mean, Baltics are a great place to be. They're a great place to be. Wonderful quality of life. Food is lacking sometimes. Can't find... I'm a big Mexican lover, and you can't really find much of that in Eastern Europe. Corn tortillas are hard to make here, but the quality of life, the people, the way to live, it's very nice. Of course, we have some defense challenges over the next couple of years. So that was my Good Friday spiel, guys. It'll be very interesting if the U.S. drops out of this group. I hope they don't. I think it would be against the U.S.'s interest to do so. As an American and a European, I hope they don't. I think it's true, some of the things that Trump says. Certainly, Germany should spend more, and Italy should spend more. Canada and Spain should spend more. But these countries are not going to stop. Some can be neutral to the U.S., some can be hostile. Trump is very much making this one hostile at the moment. I don't have much sympathy for those that's the tankies or the Vatniks that sympathize for Russians' war of aggression against Ukraine. That's why I try to show these. If it's such a Christian liberal value country, and again, I have nothing against if someone is an individual here from one of these countries. I have nothing against any individual in one of these countries, but there are patterns from types of countries, and Russia's not in the good side. It's not on the good end of the spectrum here. It's quite low in sanitation, according to WHO. Let's say between 1 in 5 and 2 in 5 Russians don't have working toilets. That's nationwide. It's a big country. Wastewater, way lower than Ukraine or any developed nation as far as wastewater management. HIV, as we know, towards the top of the scale. Some other diseases. And 90th in the world as far as fastest to 15K. Oops, 90th. And if you inflation adjusted these numbers, it would look even worse. It would, Monaco would 15K in 1972 for Monaco's, what you'd have to do is to get to 15K of Russia today, you'd have to go even farther back to Monaco. It would make sense. You have to go back 50. I mean, even think about this. 15K is, I'm sure, better than, 1950s Monaco, 1940s Monaco. It's a wild thing to think about. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously tough for us as well. We've had a lot of labor and trade with the UK, and do you think that? Because I hear some weird things about Brexit. Obviously, you've had one of the main gripes or complaints pre-Brexit was immigration. I understand immigration is much higher post-Brexit, so I wonder how people feel about that in the UK. I don't know about this. Is it a headline, Gio? Gio, you got to give me some coffee, man. You're the one that you bring all the news to this channel. I just bring the charts. Roman hasn't heard it. Those are all the charts I had prepared, guys. Let me know if you want to look at anything else. I think we're going back here. It's not the end of America, for sure. But if yields go up and markets go down, right? We had that in the 60s, in the 70s. Yields go up, markets go down. It seems like we're going there. Unless Trump tries to fire Powell and just go to ZERP interest rate policy again. Yeah, this is my understanding as well. I'm sure there were bright spots, and the UK has always wanted to be different from Europe as far as having full sovereignty and not trying to lose around the edges there. But Geo says ECB President Lagarde has announced plans to get rid of. Oh, I saw this. Yeah, no, she's not saying get rid of it. She's saying we need to compete against it. I saw that. Did she actually announce it? Some posts on X. I don't think this is. I think this is X news. Some posts on X say that European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde announced that she's planning to replace the payment systems with European alternatives. I mean, they can say that. First of all, the CBDC plan, the European Union has been trying to do this for years now. You can't do a CBDC. CBDCs will remove deposits from banks. That's the main liquidity that banks have to lend money, is deposits. So if you're going to remove deposits from banks to go into a European Central Bank app, that's a negative. And the second thing is, what's the second thing is? It's more of a function of fees as well. Banks do make money from banking fees, banking transactions, deposit. And as much as people might hate that, that's still those are going down, right? We have cloud banks like Revolut and Wise, TransferWise, which are pretty low on fees these days. Certainly a lot lower than the brick and mortar banks, and but it's still a function of it. And I think banks are the biggest. Banks are the main constituency of the central bank. So that's true. The Federal Reserve is not a fully private bank, but it's not also a fully government bank. It has government oversight, but it has private ownership. It's not coming. It's definitely not coming to the United States, and it's not going to come. I think Europe is trying to push it the most, specifically the Scandics, but I don't think that it's coming. So what she's saying is, yeah, maybe a 500 euro minimum ECB wallet that Europeans can pay for, but that's just going to take business away from the banks. So not 500 euro minimum, 500 euro maximum, I meant to say. Because you can't, you got to put limits on these. If you allow people to withdraw, first of all, it's not going to be uncensorable like Bitcoin, but if you would allow people to withdraw like 10,000 euros from SocGen or Santander or Deutsche Bank, that 10,000 euros is immediately a drain on those banks' lending power. And they're not going to like it. They're just not going to like it. So that's why the ECB has said if we're going to do a CBDC, it's going to have a max, like maybe 500 euros or 1,000 euros. But again, what's the point of that? So yeah, she's definitely talking about the competitiveness of the European system, which needs a lot of work. Visa and MasterCard is a force. That's a function of the euro dollar. It's a function of the Marshall Plan. It's a function of world. These are 80-year tailwinds for America. Hey, Yuri. Yeah, the lack of clear discussion of the issues around immigration was one of the major reasons for Brexit. Roman says they got their blue passports back. I don't use it. Is it good, Gio? Everybody says good things about it. I just don't use it. This is Fold app. He's talking about Fold app. But yeah, I hear great things about Fold. Here's the quarter end a year from now. 400,000 is the top, in my opinion. I mean, I just don't see it going higher than 400,000. .6x, which is my 97th percentile, I think it's too high. And remember, we did not hit that in 2021. We did not hit the 97th and a half percentile. 3.6x the trend at the time. I agree with this. Who else agrees with this? I tried to say this on Peter's show as well. Even the free market people, all the free market people in the US over the last 15 years, especially after the crisis, the most welcoming home for their voice was Russia's Today. Ron Paul was on there, Lou Rockwell, Bob Murphy, Tom Woods, all these guys spent some time on that channel. And they would say, well, we're just speaking about our liberal values, our free market values. If someone gives a platform, we'll speak about it. I think Yuri Bezmenov has the best line for that, and that's these useful idiots have been planned for 100 years. The Cheka has been working on that for a long time. Infiltrating the West, infiltrating newspapers, infiltrating social groups, communists in America. This is it's not a new story. And yeah, I agree very much. Brexit was, people didn't think about it as much as they thought about Trump. Trump won. And Russiagate didn't have to be the way that people were saying. It's not that Trump is necessarily a Russian asset. Jury's out on that, let's say. But even if he's not, even just a New Yorker from Queens that loves real estate and rich Russians buying his apartments, which is probably the main truth, there was still massive disinformation in that campaign. The Mueller report said it was systemic. They used the word systemic. And I haven't looked into Brexit as much, but it's just no doubt that was the precursor to the Trump win in 2016, and Brexit happened in 2015. So that was it. Yeah, I think MSTR is interesting. Let's go. So, MicroStrategy has okay, so this is good. This is good that they have it. They have, the 500,000. This is just unbelievable what MicroStrategy has done. Sailor is the biggest component of this green band, the green band here. Okay, it's our friends at CoinKite with this site. 500,000 Bitcoins, just been incredible. And he's earning this number, 1.9 basically in share value versus how much Bitcoin they hold underlying. I believe that's the number. That's the correct point. Yeah. Their USD value of Bitcoin is 44 billion. Their market cap's 84 billion. Can you sort this? Wow. Actually surprised at BlackRock. Can that be? That's a mistake. or something with their billions and millions, because it's not 6.15 Bitcoin they have, maybe. I don't know what's happening with BlackRock there. Or maybe that's true. That's not the fund. That's not IBIT. That's just BlackRock itself. There's a lot of other things happening in BlackRock other than other than the 6.5 Bitcoin. So it doesn't really make sense. But if you go down to, let's say, a company that has a decent amount, like Nexon, I don't even know them. 85x over there. Bitcoin leverage. But anyway, point is, usually you're gonna have way higher market cap than the value of your Bitcoin holdings. Is market cap divided by the value of your Bitcoin holdings. And MicroStrategy is like a pure Bitcoin play at this point, so they are here. Yeah. Good comment here from Roman. It's just, it is just incredible. I really do wonder how systemic it is with him. I mean, you know, so he started here, somewhere here, and he started to tell people about it. After the price jumped up from 10 grand during COVID, this is when he went public. He never stopped. He never stopped. Just kept borrowing and kept buying. And let's search Bitcoin. Galaxy 13,000. Where is... There's a lot of asymmetry here. I didn't, but I should. Geo asks, if you read the journal article, a future with no individual ownership is not a happy one. Certainly would agree with that. This is probably a response to the IMF's or the World Economic Forum's you will own nothing and you will be happy. Obvious nonsense. It's interesting. This is not going to stop, obviously, right? The question will remain how much governments will take to stop their debt. Okay, so remember, this looks like a big number for the United States. I talked about this yesterday. This number, all right, this $198,000 in Bitcoin or $16 billion worth of Bitcoin is 0.05% of the national debt. 0.05%. The gold holdings marked to market are 2% of the national debt if they have it. People still doubt that the United States has that gold, but they did fully acquire Silk Road or took custody of it here in 2020. It's a great chart because they show, it's a great site. This is like a lot of detail that Rodolfo went into for getting someone to track this, but why is that not coming out now? So here he talks about how they took custody and from the 2013 seizure of 70,000 Bitcoin. They sold some. Remember Draper Draper bought a bunch, and then they still had some, and then they took custody of 60,000 here, and they had 200,000 total. Wait, no, this is the wrong time scale again. 60,000 here, 70,000 here. And yeah, they're gonna. This will increase, and this will be good. But this percentage is going to be huge. It's absolutely going to be huge. Compared to the national debt. All right, guys. Gonna have to do some other stuff today on this Good Friday, but just wanted to say my piece about Ukraine. Let's hope for a peaceful weekend for them. Somehow I doubt it. You're going to find hopefully thoughtful and reasonable commentary here, but I'm going to try to be unapologetic when it comes to liberal democracies, because I do think that liberal democracies are way better in every way, shape, or form than autocracies. You might have some authoritarian regimes who can manage their societies pretty well. Okay, Qatar tied for 5th here. Or actually, no, at 5th after these top 4 tied for 1st. But if Russia wants to go improve their economy, they can go do it at home. And that's going to be the challenge for everybody in the next couple of years. Happy Good Friday. Wish you all and your families a peaceful Easter weekend and a happy Easter Sunday. Good luck finding some eggs and painting eggs if you live in the U.S. and prices are high. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I'll speak to you next week. Take care.